So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Mariah Washington. I am able and I choose to serve as the Director of Community Engagement here at New York City Emergency Management. And I'm joined by my teammate and colleague, Sam Lawson. He'll be helping monitor the chat as well as the Q&A section. This will be a very interactive training session in the beginning. Then it will shift to be content heavy. However, as questions arise, we encourage you to send them in the chat. We will have a time at the end in which we will cover the question and answers as well. So thank you again for joining. Before we jump into this training, I just wanted to play a short video and then we'll get started.
New York City faces a range of emergencies, from severe weather to fires to power outages and much more. If your community organization or network isn't prepared, it's hard to respond calmly and effectively. That means you might not be able to continue serving your community when they need you the most. But with a plan in place, your community network has a much better chance of being able to help others. New York City Emergency Management's Community Preparedness Program offers local community and faith-based networks and organizations the tools they need to prepare for, respond to, and recover from emergencies. Learn what you need to have in place before an emergency. You can find out how to identify local resources to create a community resource directory and show your community members where to go for specific services or assistance. The program also offers a framework for coordinating volunteers and creating an emergency communication plan to help you stay connected with your community. The program also provides a blueprint for what to do after an emergency. You can learn how to prioritize resources and services, and the best ways to manage volunteers and donations. This ensures you don't get overwhelmed by resources you can't use and get enough of what you need. Emergencies happen. But having a plan means your organization can continue to be of service even during the tough times. So sign up with the Community Preparedness Program today and let New York City Emergency Management help you organize your community network as you help others.
So thank you for viewing our video. I wanted to make sure I played that video because I'm looking at all of our attendees and some of you are new guests for us. Community preparedness, we are focused on community and faith-based organizations and networks. And so our audience is very much that. You are community leaders throughout your areas, and we will hope and want for you to take the information that you learn in this training and throughout all of our webinar series through this month of National Preparedness Month, take it back to your community and jump into the work, and also know that you have access to our team for additional trainings as well. So we're going to be talking about developing communication strategies. And so before we jump in, I have a little question that I want to ask you all. So it's going to pop up. And the question is, does your organization have an emergency communication plan? So you can click on yes or no. This pop-up should have came. Does your organization have an emergency communication plan? Yes or no? Just going to wait for a few more responses. Okay. All right. So we are about 50-50. 50% of you all do indeed have an emergency communication plan, and 50% of you all do not. So this is a great blend. because when we start in some discussion areas, we're definitely going to tap into you all. So when we're doing this training, the first thing that we like to tap into and remind you all and speak away is just the importance of how you are collecting the information from your community and in what ways you count as official sources. Some of you may say, I use Citizen app. Others of you may say, well, I don't use Citizen app. I use Notify NYC. Others of you may say, I use New York Post. And in so many ways, we want to make sure that you know what the official sources of information are. As leaders, you are amplifying the messaging. And we don't ever want to scare our community. We want to prepare them and keep them together and comforting throughout whatever the emergency is. Recently, we have experienced terrible storms. We had Andre that came, and then more recently, Tropical Storm Ida impacted us severely in several communities throughout the city. This is currently hurricane season. Hurricane season goes into November 30th. And during this time, as a city, we'll continue to experience some of these tropical storms, the flooding, and all the different other impacts. And so, our challenge, our positive challenge to you, is to identify when these emergencies happen, how you're going to communicate with your team internally and how you're going to communicate with the public that you're serving, whether it be it might be clients, it may be the congregation, it may be other community members, it may be a group of volunteers, whoever your population is that you are serving or working with. We want to be sure that you have a plan to be able to gather information and share that information with that group. So before we jump into our what will you do, I want to ask you one more question. And the question is, what communication method or methods does your organization utilize when outreaching to members, clients, and or the public? What communication method or methods does your organization utilize when outreaching to members, clients, and or the public? So you should see this pop up and you can check whichever ones are appropriate. I see some email. A lot of folks are saying emails. A couple of folks have said in person and door knocking. Okay, we got some live phone calls. Okay, we have some folks who said social media. Just waiting for a couple of more responses. All right. All right. So we have 100% of you have communicated. Hey, we utilize email to message out with it to our members, our clients, and or the public. Some of you all have identified robocalls. So you use robocalls to call down throughout your community. Others of you use a phone tree process where you do live phone calls. Some of you are utilizing social media as a tool in the method of communication. Some of you are utilizing some messaging apps. So that's WhatsApp, Signal, Remind. All are very unique tools that allow you to message to multiple group of people at one time. And then we have a person in the group who does some in-person door knocking and they post flyers. And so why it's important for us to kind of hear what methods you utilize is that there are so many methods that we can utilize in communication. We've worked with a couple of community groups and they utilize ham radios and they have a radio channel within their network and that's how they're able to message throughout the South Bronx and East Harlem. There are other folks who likewise, like many of you, utilize email, but it's also important to identify where some of the gaps may be within your community, and you all are the experts of those gaps. And so in so many ways, we want you to be sure that you know what those gaps are and you have identified a solution. And so it may be that you have a population of people who are not super into technology or may not have internet access. And so that may require a phone call, or that may require them seeing a bulletin board or someone that's canvassing and knocking on the door. So this is not to say that there's only one way. This is to say, like, consider the many options and make sure that you're meeting the needs of your community, not just what's convenient to you as the community leader. So for this next piece, what would you do? I'm going to take time and I'm going to read a scenario to you a couple of times. I'm going to take the PowerPoint slide off, and I have a Mentimeter for you to kind of take time and just think about it. So there won't be any pressure. This is totally just for our virtual interaction and for us to get an understanding of how different people would respond. So here is the scenario. A fire breaks out in an 8-story residential building within your community. The fire is rapidly spreading throughout the building. The scene is blocked off by emergency responders, and hundreds of people are believed to reside in the building. Residents are being evacuated, and it is clear people will not be able to return to their homes in the evening. How will you communicate with your network if cell phone towers and the internet is down? And how are you going to communicate with your community members? I'm going to drop in the questions in as well as the description, to make sure that we get our visual learners as well. So the scenario again is a fire breaks out in an 8-story residential building within your community. The fire is rapidly spreading throughout the building. The scene is blocked off by emergency responders, and hundreds of people are believed to reside in the building. You see, the residents are being evacuated, and it is clear people will not be able to return to their homes. What would you do? At this time, I want you to take your time. Again, this is a low pressure activity. For those of you who are on a mobile device or on your desktop, you can head to the website www.menti.com and go ahead and enter this code 41822763. And I want you all to just take time and identify, how are you going to communicate with your community members? What actions will your organization take? And really think about the who, what, and when. And you could take your time with this. I see a couple of folks have jumped in and have started some responses. Again, this is a low pressure activity and discussion. There are 2 different questions listed, and you can answer them at your pace. So far, someone said we'll use a landline phone. That's how we'll communicate within our network if the internet and the cell phone towers are down. And if you're unable to access Mentimeter, you can also put your responses in the chat. So this is not to create an additional barrier, but definitely incorporate some of your comments in the chat as well, and we'll just read them out loud. All right. Someone said go door to door, ride around in a vehicle, and use a microphone and or a megaphone. Even if we think about how Tropical Storm Ida recently hit us, and there were some power outages, you know, some of you might have checked on a neighbor. Did any of you, some of those people who said they have an emergency plan, what was your method of reaching out to check to make sure that all the people on your team were okay? Okay, thank you. Robocalls to the landlines. Yes, you are not first responders. We do not want you to ever serve as a first responder. We want you to allow the space for the first responders to respond. What we do recognize is that each and every one of you, as community leaders and as community organizations throughout your community, the members look to you as a source of information and a trusted source of comfort. And in so many ways, it may be that you just have a chat group and you're providing updates that you are receiving from the first responders, from New York City Emergency Management, or even from Notify NYC. So when we are asking these questions, it definitely is never, never our message for you to jump in as the first responder, nor is it our method for you to jump in and figure out all the solutions. However, we know that you as a human being and as a leader, you're a great resource and you're trusted resources within your community. So we're gonna shift gears. Someone else within this said, "Hey, I'm gonna do a telephone tree. I'm gonna gather the CERT team. I'm gonna contact NISM and utilize the citywide radio." So I think we have a CERT volunteer in the room, and set up a net control and use the radios to coordinate with NISM and the first responders. So to that CERT leader, thank you for that. For our other listeners, CERT has a direct line with New York City Emergency Management. They have radios that they're able to communicate on the ground what's happening, not because they're first responders, but because they are trained emergency response volunteers who are able to serve and support first responders in the course of action, whether it be directing traffic, whether it be doing a search and rescue, whether it be helping greet folks into a shelter after a disaster. There are a variety of things that our CERT leaders do. So thank you so much for sharing that. So you all mentioned earlier a couple of different resources that you utilize when you're communicating within your network. And so here we've listed a couple of others. We talked about phone trees. There's websites. Some folks have very active websites in which they post the most recent updates and people know that they can go to that website. Some folks use social media. It may be Nextdoor, it may be LinkedIn, it may be Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it may be. Some people might be using TikTok as a way to reach out to their community. There are other folks who have access to community centers and they utilize bulletin boards in the community center as a hub of information. There's posters and flyering that still happens. I know even now with the service center, there are flyers all throughout the city digitally, but the city has also made sure to print out flyers and start distributing it out for folks who may not have access to the internet. We have radios, and so we heard from our CERT leader of how to utilize that, and we have other community groups in Harlem, in the Bronx, who also utilize that. And then there's canvassing as well. There's canvassing to really go door to door and check in on the neighbors and see what's happening. And then we often say, you want to always make sure that you are considering the needs of your members who may have disabilities. They may have access or functional needs. So they may require a wheelchair, or they may have a service animal to guide them around. They may be limited in their hearing and or seeing. English may not be their first language. That's another consideration as well. You may have a large population of older adults or children where both populations are very much vulnerable. So, whatever it may be for your specific community, you want to make sure that you begin to script out messaging before the emergency so that when the emergency happens, you're able to fill in the blank and just message it out. So we're going to jump in, and when we say creating an emergency communication plan, all the action steps that we're sharing today, we are recommending them to you. We are not saying this is the definitive way and the only way to create a communication plan for emergencies. We're giving you knowledge and resource, and take what helps you and leave what doesn't help you, or take it all and apply it all and be better prepared within your community. So the first step that we're going to talk about a little bit is the established communication leads to keep the communication flowing. The second step is plan multiple ways to give and receive information. Then we want to think ahead and write out messaging scripts. We want to document. We never want you as the leader to have all the information in your mind and hoard it in your mind to the point that if you get sick or you get impacted by said emergency, no one else knows what the plan is. So I will continue to repeat: document, whether it be a virtual cloud. I can't promote any sources, but we have different resources in which we can have a cloud. Or you might say, hey, we need to print out too for some of our members. And then the other thing is always to just remember the different best practices that you might hear from your colleagues, that you might read about in different articles, and apply those best practices. So when you're establishing your communication leads to keep the communication flowing, it's about having a team. I often say teamwork makes the dream work. A team is made up of more than one human being. And so here we are saying establishing an emergency communication team. Think about at least 4 people. And if you say 4 is too many, okay, think about 3 people. So you have someone who is lead in establishing that communication, someone who's going to be the social media point, and the successor 1 and successor 2. Those are folks who can step into either the lead role or the social media role. They also are support staff to help amplify messaging. So diving in a little bit deeper, when you think about the lead role, think about someone who's gathering the information. That person is also organizing a meeting with the emergency communication team. That person is approving the message. That person is amplifying messaging internally as well as with the general public. The social media captain, they're writing out the message. They're including the verified sources. So that would, of course, be anything that is sent out through the mayor's office of community affairs, the actual mayor's office, their press team, New York City Emergency Management, mayor's office of immigrant affairs. If any of these city agencies are issuing out press releases or amplifying, here is a resource available, then that is something that is very much official. If you are in a place where you have some doubts or reservation of whether something's official or not, you can always call 311, and 311 is monitored 24/7. We also are in touch with our 311 folks. We provide scripts for them. We also reach out to them to see what trends are happening. We review the data. We're able to see who's calling from which zip codes and by how often they're calling. So 311 is definitely a resource we utilize. If you say, I don't want to call 311, I just want to reach out to somebody directly that I may know, you are able to reach out to our community preparedness team, and that's with communityprep@oem.nyc.gov. And we're actively monitoring that email as well when emergencies are happening, and we can start that two-way communication. And when you think of your successor 1, where it says text, that might be where you add an additional responsibility, but both of your successors are going to be amplifying the messaging that you all have approved. And they're going to do it by word of mouth, flyers, phone calls, social media, whatever it may be. They're going to be the people who are on boots on the ground or virtually making sure that they're amplifying it. These successors should also know how to do that social media captain role in the event that the social media captain is impacted by the emergency, away on vacation, or away for their own family emergency. For the lead, you want to have a backup lead. Some folks choose their executive director as the lead. There may be a program director or a program coordinator or someone else that's approved within your organization in your structure. And you want to make sure you have that person set up, and so that they can approve the messaging. What you don't want to happen is you get to the place where you all meet, you have some messaging, and it's like, wait, we don't have the person to approve it. So really consider these steps. Making a plan and having multiple ways to give and receive information. The number one way that information has been given successfully worldwide is word of the mouth. At the end of the day, word of mouth is the most powerful tool we had. When we first experienced COVID-19 during the first wave last year, it was tough because it was like, wait a minute, because of this pandemic, we're not able to get in front of people's faces and do our traditional word of mouth. And so some networks and organizations and congregations were a little bit stuck for a little while until they created a plan. The purpose of this training is to make sure that that stuckness doesn't happen again. Email is a resource that you all shared. Some of you may produce newsletters, both virtually as well as printouts. Text messaging, telephone, landline, not via internet. And I know that landlines are becoming very much limited throughout the city and really throughout the nation. However, we still have unique populations that utilize landlines. And so tapping into that, cell phone, low cost two-way radios. If you are some folks who are trained and you're like, hey, we want to use the walkie talkies, we want to have a channel just for our organization and network so that we can better respond, then that's something that you're able to do. There's different trainings online. There's different networks who are really great in doing this. One network, Harlem Emergency Network slash South Bronx Emergency Network, they provide amazing training within their team to really get folks to understand how to use the ham radio, the different systems and procedures, considerations, and they make sure they train their folks up. And so there's always somebody who knows something, who is willing to help out others. But you want to again choose the method that best serves your community, and that you as an organization and network have access to. So you see on the upper right corner, we say page 22 and page 23. And here we're referring to the community emergency plan. And our community emergency plan is the anchor of a lot of our trainings, and that we have dissected different sections from that toolkit to really allow you to focus and dive in and make it a little bit more manageable. And so when you identify your communication methods, you really want to chart out your outreach plan of how you're going to amplify messaging with your partners. You're going to list the type of communication. You're going to describe the population. You're going to describe what, are there people who are only speaking Mandarin in your community, and you have no one on site that can provide that. You want to document all of those different elements. The point of creating emergency plans of any sort is to document it and share it with the core team so that multiple people know how to respond and how to tap in to said resources when that emergency happens. When you're thinking ahead and you're writing out messaging, in so many ways you want to create templates, and that's what you can tap into your communication team. You may say, we are small and mighty, we don't have a communication team. Well, within your team, identify some folks who are willing to be part of that emergency communication team and spend time on establishing different templates. And so when I say different templates, you might need a template for if there's a blackout, a template involving a coastal storm. Think of the common frequent emergencies that happen in the city as well as that really impact your community. And you want to create some templates and have some fill in the blank languages out there to really provide that. Yes, we will provide some of these templates as well as the slides, and as well as the toolkit as well. We also say you want to keep messaging clear, specific, and concise. Now, I've been talking nonstop for 15 minutes. If I were the communication lead, I would dare not produce something where someone's going to be talking on the phone with each person that they have to call for over 10 minutes. It literally should be a couple of bullet points. You don't want to ever have a paragraph of information. You want to keep it very concise, very specific, and very clear. You don't insert your opinions, you're inserting the facts, and you're going to let folks know we're going to be in touch and follow up as we get more information. So you're giving them the hook for them to know that they can remain in touch with you and that they should expect from you to follow up as well. So here's an example of when we say templates. Here's a small example. Again, whenever we're showing you examples and sharing best practices and methods, there is no, this is the only way. There may be various ways that better suit your community organization and your community network, and that is okay. And that is what is needed and wanted for your community. So for message one template, you see we say date, we put a blank, a underline, and time, that's an underline, and then our permanent content. This is an emergency notification from the Washington Community Network. At approximately blank time, a blank brief description of what happened. When you get to this brief description of what happened, we're not using emotions. Brief description of what happened. Tropical storm Ida hit us at approximately, put the time, put the date. As a result, flooding is expected in our community. At this point, we don't know the number of households impacted. We will continue to gather information and release it to you as soon as possible. We ask for your patience as we respond to this emergency. For you, you're not a first responder. You might say we ask for your patience as we gather information about this emergency. So you're going to tweak your language based on what you are the expert for and based on what your community and your members trust and expect from you. The second message template that we have here, this is an emergency notification from Washington Community Network at approximately 8:27 a.m. Tropical storm Ida impacted and hit New York City. As a result, flooding unexpectedly impacted the Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, and parts of Manhattan as well, in Brooklyn. At this point, we still do not know the number of people impacted. The situation is under control. We are working with the city authorities to assess and determine the resources needed. As soon as we have more information, it will be provided. We ask for your patience as we respond to this emergency. So message one is really the template of, hey, this emergency happened. We know it's happened. We're going to be in touch with you again to give you more information. Message two, you may not have a lot more information, but the moment you are connected with Sam, myself, or Jill, or someone that's anchored in NISM, or whatever else your partnerships may be with, it may be with the New York City Department of Health, then you can say we are working with city authorities. And in that, like, you all are identifying the needs, you're assessing the needs, you're identifying the resources, and you're letting the people know we're going to be in touch as we have more information. So you really want to keep the templates very simple, very concise. These are of greater substance, so this would be a very long text. You will very much shorten it. Your templates, you may have various template models. So you may have one template for text messaging and then a longer template for the emails to give that little bit extra information and a little bit extra content. Now for step 4, I've said it, document, document, document. Document and share the network's communication strategy. Document and share the scripted messages. Digitally store your emergency communication plan and resources in a cloud. So that may be a Google Drive. That may be I think OneDrive is another example. You may use Microsoft Teams. You may use your own website and just have a personal login that everybody on your team has. But you want to make sure you have a digital version and, of course, a print out version as well. Now, some best practices for you to remember while you're communicating through an emergency. You want to respond quickly. You want to remain honest. You want to correct misinformation, but don't delete comments. So, for those of you who are using social media, here's an example. I think over the weekend, someone on social media, or there was a buzz going around that the city was sending out um, employees to randomly knock on doors to assess if people were illegally living in basements. And so the city, New York City Emergency Management, said rumor control. That's what we subjected. We said rumor control. The city is only assessing spaces that have been identified as impacted by the emergency. The city is not evacuating or mandating people who live in basements to get out. Like, that's not what we're doing. We're responding if people said that there was an emergency and their basement was impacted. Yes, we're responding. No, we're not evacuating people just because they happen to live in a basement. So you likewise will have a lot of varieties of ways in which you're going to have to do some rumor control. You also can push it over to us, emergency management, and say, hey, this concern keeps rising up. We don't know if it's fact or fiction. Will you help us? But keeping the comments are important because it has a thread. And that way, folks don't think that you're trying to hide something, because you're not trying to hide anything. You're just correcting misinformation. So it's just a matter of reposting and making a new post, or you might say edit slash rumor control update, and then above the original post you put the new content to provide that clarity. Don't disappear from any platform. By this, what we're saying is, if you are using Twitter and you have a Twitter following within your community and that's where they know that you're going to post information, don't, if you post every hour and it's 3 p.m., then the people are going to expect for you to post 4 p.m. unless you say otherwise. So manage the expectations in that moment, for whatever platform you may be utilizing. That could be the website. That might be even folks who make phone calls. I have a friend, for example, who I'll talk to her at 8:30 a.m. Good morning. God bless. Okay, have a good day. And then she's like, oh, I got to go. I'll call you back. And so for the longest, for 2 years, to me, when I heard her say, I'll call you back, I interpret that as she's going to call me back in 20 to 30 minutes and we'll pick up the conversation. Her reality was, I'm going to call you back means it might be anytime this today or even tomorrow in the evening that I call you back. So you, as a trusted leaders, as a trusted organization, and or as a trusted network, you want to make sure you don't disappear and that you manage those expectations. So it may even be that you say, okay, our last post is at 4 p.m. today because there's so much new information coming out about Tropical Storm Ida and it's getting confusing and overwhelming. At the very bottom of your post, it might be like, this is the last post for the day. We'll be in touch as we get more information in the following days. So that extends grace, that manages the expectation, and you haven't disappeared from your platform. And then the fifth one is to show compassion. During emergencies, every single one of us show up very differently. Some of us manage it very with a lot of grace, and we are at peace, and we just speak the facts. Others of us have an aggressive tone, and we get frustrated and flustered. Other of us, our brain just starts feeling mushy and we're not able to process simple statements like we were before, and we need people to re-explain something. Can you re-explain that to me? Can you re-explain? And so if you're making phone calls, or you have someone in your team making phone calls, you want to make sure that they have compassion, that they are not going to be someone that's going to be short with the people if people are asking them to repeat themselves. You want to make sure that they're someone that's going to have that grace, that patience, and that peace to keep people calm. You don't want to scare folks. You want to prepare them and keep them in touch and let them know, as a trusted source in the community, you're working on it collectively. So again, you establish your communication leads, the roles, responsibilities, how you will want to keep your communication flowing. Step 2 is you're going to provide multiple ways to give and receive information. Step three, you're going to think ahead and you're going to actually write out messaging scripts. Step four, you're going to document, you're going to share, you're going to store it physically as well as virtually so that your team and other folks have access to the plan. And you're going to tap into those best practices. You're going to make sure that you're leading with compassion, you're not disappearing from social media platforms, you're being concise and accurate, and you are not deleting posts, but you are doing the rumor control as needed as well. So I keep saying official sources of information. That would be Notify NYC for all of those who live in New York City. We encourage you to either download the app or you can create a profile and you can choose the zip codes in which you want notifications. You can also receive citywide notifications. We also post this every post that we put within Notify NYC. When it's a citywide emergency, we do utilize it on social media. We utilize Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, sometimes YouTube, as well as Nextdoor. Our websites are always accurate and very up to date. Right now, we have a very specific website for IDA that I'll type in right now, and that's nyc.gov/IDA. And there you will find the variety of resources that the city is providing, as well as the declarations that were recently made by FEMA. We have our Help Now NYC website. We only activate this website when we are, as a city, managing volunteer requests and or donations requests. We often say cash is best. You saw that in the commercial at the beginning of this workshop. And why we say that is that when we get donations from all throughout the city, it's hard to coordinate. There was a fire in 2018, I believe, in the Bronx, a four-family fire. Folks flooded and dropped off all these prom dresses and bags of clothes. And so before they knew it, within a week's time, they had a whole school gymnasium full of bags of donations for four families, which were less than 20 human beings. And so they had to unfortunately discard of most of the donations because they didn't assess it. They don't know like what's what, and then it becomes waste versus donations. And folks have great intentions when emergencies happen, and you want to make sure you manage that. So Sam and I are going to be doing a workshop on that later on in this month about how you can manage donations and volunteers and considerations for your organization to take to make sure that when emergencies happen, you're still able to continue with whatever services you're providing, whether it be your food pantry or you're providing social work or case counseling, whatever it may be. We want to make sure that you're in a place where you feel equipped and prepared and you have created a plan specific to your organization and or network to really respond to emergencies. And when we say respond, it is a reaction, but it has a plan. It's not I don't we don't want you to go to the site of where there's 8 feet of water and a sinkhole happening, but we want you to know what's happening in your community and message to others so that they are able to be aware and stay safe in the midst of that. The community preparedness newsletter is issued every Wednesday. Sometimes we also issue out press releases. So this past 7 days, if you're registered on the newsletter, you more than likely have received at least 4 to 5 different messaging from us via constant contact. And that's our way to share the resources, upcoming trainings, as well as, hey, here's what the city is able to provide. Here's what FEMA is able to provide. I'm going to share all of this in the coming week for all of you. But if you were to say, hey, Mariah, this was a good training, we want to get started. Where do we start? Right here is how we've listed a good starting point if you want to create a emergency communication plan. So first, you want to establish your organizational chart for the emergency communication plan. You want to identify the written roles and responsibilities. You want to map out the outreach strategy chart. You want to think ahead and write out your scripts. You want to have at least 5 different messages. You want to keep it clear, concise, and you can say, okay, I want to do it based on fire, collecting donations, an emergency community meeting, blackout, extreme heat. You might say, I want to do it for a coastal storm because we are always hit hard because we're on the coast. Totally fine. After and when you complete your communication emergency plan, you want to share it out with the rest of your network and organization for them to know that there's a plan in place. Because often what happens in an emergency, some folks are wonderful problem solvers, and in that they reinvent the whole wheel. So if you invested hours in a couple of weeks and even a couple of months into establishing a plan, you want to share it with your team and let folks know we do have a plan in place. The following people have access to it. Here's how it's impacting you. Here are roles and responsibilities we have for you in the event that there's an emergency, and here's how to access it. You may say we don't want them to see it all the time. That's fine, but still let them know it exists so that when that emergency happens, they can say, "Oh yeah, Mariah said that there's a plan, and I know that I need to contact one of these three people, and they'll be able to tell me what action steps I need to take according to the plan." So I'm going to pause there. I am going to take a sip of water and give you all some time to ask questions. And then I'm also going to pass the microphone over to Sam for him just to share a few updates about the FEMA resources available for those impacted by Ida. Sam, are you still on the line?
Yep. And can you hear me, Mariah?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much, Sam.
Great. So while everyone writes any questions that they have, I know we have a few outstanding questions already. Um, as you know, the city resources are listed at nyc.gov/IDA. A big development that came out this week was that New Yorkers are now eligible for federal assistance. So people living in the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island are eligible for individual assistance. What this means is that damages caused by Hurricane Ida are potentially reimbursable by the federal government. So this means that people are potentially could receive funds for anything that they lost. There's also a link there to apply for other city services and also to file a claim with the comptroller's office. One thing I also wanted to note was that the city currently has 5 physical service centers opened up in addition to the website, and that is where affected residents can go in person to receive services. We keep that webpage updated, including those locations. One thing to note too about those locations is that FEMA is now staffing the boroughs where individual assistance is available. So if there are people who would rather apply in person to get assistance with FEMA, they can go there in person. I'll stop there, but we, of course, will be sending out more info as it develops, and we're always available for questions.
So we do have a couple of questions. The first one is, have new locations for service center been added besides the first 5? I asked because I saw something about a new Bed-Stuy site. And so what we will say right now is they are planning on identifying some new service sites. All of the details have not yet been released. We are anticipating it being released within and by this weekend. Once we have that information, we will amplify it out. And then I want to reiterate what Sam also communicated with FEMA. FEMA will have disaster sites and FEMA staff members on site to help support folks with their claims through the disaster assistance program. And so if you are going to apply for the disaster assistance with FEMA, stick with that. Go know that you need to document, take pictures. If you or your loved one or colleagues or community members have been impacted in any form or fashion, go ahead and have them start taking pictures. If they have receipts for whatever is damaged, have them start working on that. But do know that the disaster assistance program, while it does reimburse you, it is a process, and you have to have very, very clear documents to submit within their portal. We are working on coordinating a training with the FEMA reps for them to really speak on how to access the system and what to anticipate when you apply for disaster assistance. As of now, we do not yet know if the FEMA sites will be merged with the service sites. It is something that's in discussion. Again, once we have that finalized, we will communicate that out with you all. Are there any other questions, concerns, wonderings, or thoughts?
I'm not sure if you answered this, Mariah, but we did have a question. Is emergency management able to provide, sorry about the noise, the templates that you used?
Oh, yes. We will definitely provide those templates. I'm going to share this PowerPoint slide with you all in the coming week. In that, you will have some templates in a Word document as well. So if you and your team wanted to jump into the work, you can begin to do that work. Okay. So we'll have a stopping point there. Again, we'll encourage you all to continue to check out our website, um, nyc.gov /ID as in dog, A as in apple. There we will be posting all the information in regards to damage assessment tools, submitting claims with FEMA. With FEMA, if you have insurance, they're going to discourage you from submitting a claim. If you don't have insurance, then absolutely. Again, documentation is very much key. So have your folks in the community begin to take pictures with a decent camera. Any type of camera phone that is a smartphone should take decent pictures, and have them store that up. If you're looking for ways to support your community on that, just give them a head start and just say, like, document the damages, gather their receipts. They might have been purchases with debit and credit cards. So that can help as well. Stay in touch with us on that website, nyc.gov /IDA, and from there you'll know the most interest, like you'll know the most updated information. The information for post storm Tropical Storm Ida is changing very rapidly. And so we're mindful about how we're messaging, because we know that if we message you today, there's going to be some updates come tomorrow. So stand by for that information. You also have access to Sam and I, as well as our team. And I just want to drop that email in here very quickly. And that's communityprep at oem.nyc.gov. So by all means, if you need anything or if you're curious about anything, and if you are seeing anything that's not happening in your community, please reach out and let us know immediately so that we can work on these things. We know that there are various community groups who are actively working and troubleshooting throughout the community. We do our best to stay in touch with those community groups, but we want to, if you are a community group who's actively responding, by all means, give us a heads up and let us know what you're up to, and what resources you may need so that we can better support you in your efforts. So thank you all so much. Stay safe throughout this journey, and we will be in touch very soon.